Welcome to this afternoon's fireside chat, cross-vertical conversations with Identity's top draft pick. Please welcome to the virtual stage, Johnny Ayers, founder and CEO of Socure. Johnny, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, Cameron. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So for those of our attendees who may have been living under a rock this past month and have not seen the headlines, would you mind just giving us a little bit of your background and talk through, your role in the founding of Socure and some of that go-to-market story before we get into the big news of the day?
Absolutely. So, we started Socure, which is an identity verification fraud prediction platform for the digital age, a little over 8 years ago. We started with this idea that you could use graph analytics and kind of all these versions of an identity across the internet to create the future of identity verification. Certainly over the 8 years, it's been nonlinear, as most entrepreneurial paths are. But we were very fortunate to have an incredible group of young kind of data and analytics first companies that spurn the initial growth. Certainly, we've ridden the wave of acceleration of fintech across payments, trading, banking, lending, and certainly on the back of this most recent financing, we're going to be taking our best-in-class services across a number of new verticals.
Fantastic. And in terms of thinking about maybe how you would distinguish yourself from your peers in the broader digital identity space, what would you say Socure's unique selling points and distinguishers are?
Yeah, so I think a lot of folks in the space have taken an approach where they'll focus on one, maybe two dimensions of a consumer's identity. They'll maybe go super deep on device, super deep on behavioral, email, phone. And I think we took a different approach, which was to focus on solving the problem, which we were being hired to solve, which is Cameron a real person? And is this actually Cameron presenting his identity for an application, a transaction, an account change event? And by focusing on that dependent variable, everything we've built at Socure and the North Star really for 8+ years now has been focused on how do we deliver the highest degree of coverage and accuracy in answering that question. And it's really a math problem, right? It's a binary classification math problem at the end of the day. And so we've really focused on being the most accurate solution. And because of that, our win rates are quite high.
Fantastic. And so I guess getting right to the chase, I think a lot of folks want to talk about this blockbuster Series D that you guys just raised, $100 million. Can you tell us a little bit about, what your strategy was in terms of raising this round? You have some great prominent investors, who those investors are and what you're looking to do with this latest capital infusion.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been very blessed with an incredible group of investors that have supported us for many years. Dan Rosen from Commerce Ventures, Rory O'Driscoll from Scale, Rob Ruckert from Sorensen, Sergey Gribov from Flint, and obviously a number of incredible strategics, Citi, Wells, Synchrony, Santander, MVB Bank, just to name a few. And then, as we went about for this financing, we were a really kind of functional team, right? We have a really good board and we really wanted to look at which funds and then obviously which partner at those funds did we feel one had the highest probability of having really strong conviction in what we're building. Two, kind of agree, right, with our notion of what identity and fraud at scale can mean across a massive graph network. Right, not just in the U.S., but as you look, kind of knock down geographical walls. And so, we honed in on probably 14 or 15 funds, and we're really myopically focused on which partner in those funds we felt were going to be a really good additive member of our board and a member of our team, and would add a new set of skills that I think, we are kind of maybe missing today or could be stronger. And we were kind of very fortunate that, Excel, $2 billion growth equity fund, which means, they can kind of invest in the next couple of years, at least, of Socure's journey, similar to what they did for CrowdStrike, similar to what they did for Slack, where they invested over 5, 6, 7 rounds. And then Amit Jawar, who had been an early employee at Braintree, really understood risk as it relates to transactions, risk as it relates to e-commerce. And then his role as kind of GM CEO at Venmo, he was very acutely aware of what it means to not be able to verify 18 to 24-year-olds, very acutely aware of the challenge of chargebacks and the expense of chargebacks. One of the things I think PayPal did really well was to look at their network, their graph, right, and all of their different applications. And Socure is in this unique position to be able to see that graph over many, many, many PayPals, right, and to be able to look across a huge network as we look to verify, those thin file, hard to verify identities, and also obviously get to that kind of perfect utopic identity classification state. And so Amit and I, had our dating period over Q4. We spent a lot of time together over the holidays. And we decided that they were going to be the right partner, and he was going to be the right partner for us to lead this financing.
And in terms of the growth of the company, I think, one of the things that I was always really excited to see about, even the press release that you guys put out is, certainly you have a leadership position in the fintech space, kind of financial services, what I would consider to be kind of more traditional identity use cases, the things that I think people typically think of when they're thinking about, KYC is, okay, can we meet these, regulatory guidelines? But I think it's obvious that you see kind of the future flywheel powering growth over these next years is really the expansion of identity applications, not just in some of these core finance verticals, but other verticals, whether it's online gaming, e-commerce, and on and on. Can you talk a little bit about, where you really see the future of the company and whether it's just limited to financial services or what's going to deliver this next set of growth for Socure?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good logos, obviously, that we have. 3 of the top 5 banks, 7 of the top 10 issuers, 100 plus of the leading fintechs, Chime, SoFi, Varo, Stash, Public, really amazing group of folks in financial services that we're very honored to be able to work with and co-innovate with. But financial services is only 60% of our revenue today. So we're actually fairly distributed already. We have a 3-letter agency. We have a number of virtual healthcare use cases. We've already kind of published a number of our big online gaming operators as we move kind of heavily into another very regulated space. But we're also seeing use cases in state. Certainly, you've seen places like California, right, have lost upwards of $20 billion to unemployment fraud. You're seeing new use cases in stadiums as they're looking to open, and how do you get into this kind of contactless checkout experience? We're seeing in retail casinos, right, where they want to move away from cash. How do you have a kind of origination and initial authentication of that contactless payment mechanism? And so we're seeing identity in all these different pockets, including even employment, right? We're onboarding at Socure 15, 16 new employees a month, fully remote. And so you think about the I-9 needs, you think about just remote background checks. There's just identity is so pervasive in the kind of fabric of the internet that we're just seeing an opportunity to replicate the kind of best-in-class accuracy and coverage that we're delivering in financial services across all of these kind of comparable, high-risk, high-value, high-volume business use cases.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, from our perspective at OWI, obviously, identity being in the name, we think identity has applications just across the entire consumer life cycle, as it were. But more critically, thinking about this intersectionality of identity and user experience, I think COVID has really changed the game with regard to consumer expectations. You have digital coming first in applications that maybe previously were expected to have in-person flows. Employee onboarding, I think, prime example of that. Are we ever going to go back to a world where most companies will not just prefer to have a completely digital and potentially contactless onboarding experience for their new employees? I think it's very likely that, look, nobody wants to go into the office for something as mundane as handing a copy of your passport and filling out paperwork. And I think platforms like Socure are really going to be critical to delivering that high level of customer experience that folks have come to expect. In some of my podcast and other conversations I've had, when you think about the impact that platforms like Amazon, Apple's credit card onboarding experience have had on consumers, they expect every interaction they have with every platform, regardless of kind of that level of assurance, that is required to be that good. And the companies that are able to meet that level of assurance and that level of friction are going to see growth, and the companies that are not able to provide that high assurance level but with low friction, I think are really going to suffer. And I think Socure is really well positioned to help companies meet that demand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the example I gave, right, related to kind of unemployment fraud, there's certainly pockets of the world where fraud is enormous, right? And I mean, $20 billion is an absurd amount of money for a single state to lose to fraud. But we're actually seeing a lot of places that fraud is not really the problem per se, right? They feel like they have it under control, but it's coming at the expense of friction to the customer, which is the customer experience you're alluding to. There's a lot of drop off. When you think about a trading platform or a digital banking platform, there's quite a few number of options, right? And so if you're subjecting your customer to unnecessary friction, you're asking them for additional forms, you're asking them to come in person, you're asking them for extra steps. This is going to cause kind of material revenue loss. And so what we're actually finding in a lot of our use cases is it's marketing, it's acquisition, it's like kind of those front end, top of the funnel folks that are actually really driving the demand for Socure. I mean, we're finding a lot of our business cases are 80-85% revenue production in actual increased acquisition numbers or increased throughput in transaction, right, where they're making interchange or however they're making their spread. This seems to be one of the biggest drivers is how do I just say yes to more good people programmatically faster and more accurately without actually changing my fraud rate. That's one of the biggest things I think that we're seeing in this digital age is folks are now like, okay, I've got my fraud under control, but now I'm optimizing for growth. I'm optimizing for expansion. I'm optimizing for my kind of competitive advantage of how do I get that extra 1, 2, 3, 4% of customers as it ends up, at $300, $500 per lifetime value. You can very quickly see business cases of 40, 50, 80, $100 million or more, right? In just some pretty simple optimization.
Yeah, well, I think, I don't want to cast aspersion, but I think a lot of the narrative around identity has been focused on, the quote unquote bad guys, keeping bad guys out. But, when you look at the metrics, even around something as, seemingly pernicious as credit card fraud, the amount of false declines, depending on whose numbers you believe. And again, it's hard because how do you prove a negative? Okay, what was actually fraud versus what was a valid decline? 6x to 8x in terms of good customers that are rejected and don't end up transacting as opposed to actual fraudsters. And when you look at, the numbers that some fraud solutions are putting out into the space, they'll say, hey, look, to justify our cost to you, look at all of this fraud we prevented. Hey, we stopped $50 million worth of invalid transactions. Well, in all likelihood, a lot of those were maybe just displeased customers who got rejected and they never came back. So you might chalk that up to, oh, look, we caught a fraudster. Well, maybe it's just somebody who went and completed their purchase on Amazon because they're not going to get, flagged as a malicious actor. So I think that's a fundamental shift we're seeing across the identity space, which is this notion of identity as an enabler and not just a defensive posture, but almost an offensive posture with user experience and customer throughput in the onboarding flow as your primary objective.
Yeah, and I think just kind of touch on some of the differentiation again with Socure is like we're an analytics company, right? 30% of my headcount is data science. We have a very unique support model. We have a very unique model for how we run POCs. We have a very unique model for how we do ongoing QBRs, upgrades, et cetera, where we are very integrated as partners to our customers. And I think that integration and that optimization enables us to have all the appropriate labels, swap, be able to do the swap in analysis that you're referring to, where we have all of their bad labels on their known population, all of their good labels on their known population. And then when you look at the unknown population, you can look at the score distribution, fraud rates within a particular centile, within a particular distribution, and you can actually prove these are good people, right? These are good identities presenting that you're actually losing revenue. And then you can apply a lifetime value to that customer. Obviously, you then take some risk adjusted off. But I think if you look at a lot of the companies in the identity and fraud space, right, they haven't taken this analytics first approach. Everything we do, right? If you look at all of our patents are related to some type of supervised, unsupervised, computer vision related machine learning, all of them. right? We built the entire platform, our binary classification platform, our clustering platform, everything from the ground up ourselves with this kind of notion and view of classification accuracy in mind. And again, when you talk about an online gaming operator, right, where they're fighting ferociously to be the first in each state, for to be the first in New York, to be the first in Michigan, to be the first in PA, if we can help them onboard 5, 6, 7% more people, you're talking 60, $70 million of revenue opportunity, right? And so it becomes like a very material competitive advantage to them to be able to eke out those additional percentage points where previously they were being either subjected to friction, sent to KBA, right, or just plain, declined or dropped out. This is a place where we're winning. I think that sometimes it's very quantitative and analytical to be able to explain to an analyst, but it really is a math problem that we feel we've really been able to partner closely with the large issuers, and now into a bunch of new verticals very closely to help them kind of prove out mathematically.
And in terms of the solution itself, at OWI in our market landscape, depending on the market segment, we kind of lay a data classification underneath that where we talk about which segments are primarily, probabilistic data driven versus deterministic. Is it safe to say that you guys are almost a blend of that in the sense that you're obviously looking to leverage deterministic attributes where available, but also supplementing with that AI ML kind of probabilistic layer to enable things like, thin file folks who maybe don't exist in enough databases to get a firm match, but you can go out to your network and see that they've maybe transacted elsewhere and kind of greenlight them where other folks looking to just get a hard, credit pull have maybe failed?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've had the luxury of, anytime you're building machine learning models, right? It's our R&D, it's a trial and error exercise, right? And so we've been feature engineering around good identities, bad identities across every dimension for 8.5 years now. This is not something we spun up 12 months ago, right? Or we're like a data company. We're like, hey, we're gonna put machine learning in our marketing now, right? I mean, we've been actually studying this problem for 8.5 years, almost in an academic sense. And getting smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter with each little piece. And so our view is that, even as you look into like WebAuthn or FIDO or some of the new kind of deterministic standards, some of the stuff we're working on with Microsoft related to verifiable credentials, you still are like probabilistically verifying the identity up front, right? And so our view is like, we believe we're going to be able to get to a point where we are not wrong, right? We get to 100% coverage of everyone over the age of 18 and are now kind of pushing younger, right? And then how do we get to perfect classification? Because we've built out every dimension: email, phone, address, date of birth, social, IP, device, behavioral, velocity, physical documents, right? And we're able to package this all in a single solution where we've optimized for all the false positives and false negatives ourselves, because I have 500 customers, right? I'm seeing traffic across every vertical, across every socioeconomic or demographic class, right? And so the ability to see this amount of information, be able to receive feedback in an automated way every day, every week, every month, is enabling us to get smarter faster than anyone else in the market is. And so as you can imagine, similar to CrowdStrike, as your graph gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right, it's a snowball. And it creates a kind of magnetic pull where people want access to this type of signal. They want to know Cameron was good at, bank 1, good at lender 2, good at fintech 3, good at telco 4, right? Like you only need to see Cameron 4 or 5 times before you know he's good. And so the ability to do this at scale, I think, is a really unique thing that we built from the ground up. Again, where we're not a data company, where like a lot of the identity fraud companies of kind of yesteryear are really data companies, not kind of technology and analytical first in terms of their approach to solving this problem.
Yeah, I think, we've written in some of our market commentary about this, but I think some of the firms that we've seen be the biggest beneficiaries of this surge in interest in digital identity over the past year are the platforms that are able to orchestrate and use analytics capabilities to really deliver value from across their network and move beyond just pure, calls against a database. Because that's where the opportunity is. And that's where, again, to your point, if you want to start getting to that 99.99% coverage rate, you're never going to be able to get there with just pure, database checks alone because of the nature of like, look, there's always new people who are aging in. There's people who are immigrating to the country who, are thin file. Like my buddy who moved from Israel, like couldn't get a credit card for like 4 years because he just, as far as they were concerned, didn't exist. Didn't matter what kind of investments or assets or career he had here. It was just like, sorry, buddy, you're a ghost.
Yeah, and there's also, there's so many things that we've built, right? Again, over 8+ years, right? We've automated how we test and evaluate and quantify third-party data. So like we've been testing data. We probably tested 150 data sources in the last 8 years, right? Probably more than a lot of banks ever have, right? In terms of vendors. Just again, to solve this problem, not income, not employment, not credit, right? Just this identity classification problem. And there's a lot of folks whose job it is to sell data, and the data is very poorly structured. Right? I tell our team all the time, like one of the most valuable, unsexy things we do is just clean data. Right? And a lot of data sources, you may only have Cameron's name, email, phone. Right? Another data source, you may only have a phone, address, SSN. Right? And you have a bunch of these kind of fragmented views of Cameron, and you have to use a bunch of different types of unsupervised machine learning, entity resolution, ontologies to basically map that these all relate to the same identity. And to do that, you need to use other data sources. You need to use feedback data, right? There's like kind of all these challenges that you have related to like even what is an identity for Cameron, right? Because if your identity's been used, your phone's been used with your wife, your phone's been used by your kid, right? Your address is in a multifamily unit, and IPs are shared, devices roll over every couple of months. Right, like these are challenging and multidynamic problems related to clustering, and that just is like your starting point. You then have to build thousands of features. Email. Think about all the different attack vectors of an email: random generation, domain risk, age, correlation to the other elements, number of times we've seen it before. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of different features or independent variables that we've had to build out over time that are either positively or negatively correlated to good or bad identities, right? And to do that, you have to have a data set which gives you what is a good and bad identity. And so each of these problems, right? And then you need a machine learning platform to be able to use all the newest forms of algorithms, right? And then you need to automate all these pieces, right? Oh, and then you need to sell it, right? And you need to sell it successfully at scale repeatedly. And so these have been challenges, right? Where again, this is not something where we're like, oh my God, the world's going digital, we're going to start this company, right? Like we've been, kind of believing that eventually the world's going digital, the world's going mobile, right? And what does identity verification, what's fraud classification mean? And what does that look like in this world? And so, yeah, we've been very fortunate to have a market timing on our side after years and years and years of incredible work, incredible innovation by a lot of folks here at Socure.
Fantastic. Well, I do want to leave a little bit on the back end to maybe hit some of these audience questions that are coming in. But before we do that, would love to get your 2 cents in terms of predictions for the future. I know we've made some predictions just in general around continued placement of digital first, in the consumer experience. But what are your thoughts on where, the broader identity industry is going to go in 2021 and beyond?
Sure. So, I mean, I think from our perspective, right, there's always this kind of futuristic, magic 8-ball. I think from our perspective, right, in the near term, we're going to be the first to get to perfect 100% coverage and perfect ID fraud classification, right? Like that's the near term. And we believe being the first to solve that, right, buys us a lot of opportunities to commercialize that across a number of different verticals. Because what we're finding is whether you're going to see teledoc or buying contacts on 1-800 contacts, or want to bet on your favorite sport on DraftKings, or you just want to start a new job, all of these folks are going to require an incredibly high degree of accuracy because of both the risk associated to it and the regulatory requirements. So that's like kind of our near-term 2021 focus, is to be the first company to be able to get to 100% coverage and 100% ID fraud classification accuracy and truly eliminate identity fraud. I think as we look beyond that, right, when we talk about moving from probabilistic to deterministic, I think this is where we're going to see some exciting opportunities to use some of these new standards to actually bind a known good ID to a known good device that's tokenized locally that folks can kind of reuse as they re-authenticate or represent their identity at a login or transaction on an ongoing basis. And I think being at the tip of the spear, being at day zero origination, being at every single transaction, I think this is going to buy us that opportunity to move horizontally into new use cases, wires, account changes, ACH, money movement. It's really going to buy us an opportunity. And I think the other piece is you're going to see networks, consortiums really emerge as a kind of a winner take most market where folks will gravitate to quality. They will gravitate to who is the best, who is the most coverage, who's the most accurate. And I think you will start to see these kind of large consortium networks be the identity providers on the web. And so, I think we're really excited. Obviously, we're doing some testing and a number of these things already. I think the fun thing is not only in the back of a fundraise, but as we continue to grow at the rate that we are, there's certainly a lot of R&D opportunity that we can do and start to test some of our theses around where identity is going to be 3 to 5 years out, which we're having the benefit of just starting to do now, which we're very excited. Hopefully, having this conversation in 3 years when a lot of those things have come to full fruition.
Awesome. Well, let's put it on the calendar for 3 years, March for 2024, and we'll check back in and see how we did. So let's hit a couple of these QA questions. I know we have just a few more minutes remaining here. First question, what are the challenges that businesses outside of financial services are facing as they move into digital commerce? I might take some liberties with this question and shape it a little bit more. Johnny, from your perspective, how do you see the needs of your non-regulated financial services customers differing from those of regulated entities when it comes to identity? Is that a false dichotomy, or is identity kind of regardless of use case?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've kind of broken it, and obviously working with One World on this, but broken it into kind of a number of small, medium, and high identity assurance use cases, right? Where there's different regulatory requirements, different risk, different security requirements, even up to some of the NIST requirements related to IL2 and IL3, right? And so I think breaking down these different segments of how identity is used into different verticals is one of the challenges, right? So we've developed a modularized architecture. We have 11 different services, and those 11 different services can be called in any combination thereof, right? And so I think from us, we have a lot of flexibility where if all they want to do is email verification, we can do that, right? If all they want to do is bind, an ownership of a phone to an individual, we can do that. If someone wants to do full document, OCR, KYC fraud, AML, monitoring, device risk, synthetic, all in a single package, we can do that as well. And so I think that's kind of one approach where our technology is very flexible to fit into a lot of different use cases. The second, I think, is, we have to do a lot of research, right? We have to understand what are the HIPAA requirements, what are the DG&E requirements, what are the ABC requirements as we look at on-demand sales and how to distribute liquor or marijuana or tobacco, right? So there's a lot of research up front that we have to do before we go head on to into an industry. And it's been that mapping, that pre-work, if you will, that helps us determine use cases, products, expected success rates. That's really obviously worked well for us thus far. And certainly our work with One World has helped us accelerate some of that to date.
Fantastic. Well, I am getting the comedy seller flashing red light. So before we get the hook here, if folks who are listening want to get in touch with you, with the Socure team to explore, how you might work together or just learn more about the platform, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, certainly. Socure.com. Obviously, the website's a good starting point. Sales at Socure.com, marketing at Socure.com. These are a number of places where you can get in touch with us. There's obviously links, resources available on the website. I probably won't give out my personal cell phone number here, but we'll
put that as a Chiron on the lower third. We'll add that in post.
But I think those are the best spots, Cameron, for us. Again, Socure.com. marketing at Socure.com and sales at Socure.com, and folks will be able to be in touch with you very quickly.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks, Johnny, so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And congratulations again on the success.
Absolutely, Cameron. Thanks so much for having me.